Public sector workers, the cost of government, where it's driving America. We've been talking about that on today's show. 1-800-282-2882. There's a heartwarming story. This will clutch at your heartstrings. From the New York Times, public workers face outrage as budget crises grow. It's about a teacher called Mary Corfield from Flemington, New Jersey, who confronted hard-hearted Governor Chris Christie over the state's education cuts. It became a YouTube classic. But since then, she's received a stream of vituperative emails and Facebook postings. People I don't even know are calling me horrible names, said Miss Corfield, an art teacher who had pleaded the case of struggling teachers. The mantra is that the problem is the unions, the unions, the unions. What do you mean, struggling teachers? What do you mean, struggling teachers? You've got a better deal than almost anybody else among your neighbours. And yet you say teachers are struggling. If you think you're struggling, what do you think the guy who owns the hardware store is doing? Or the guy who works in the hardware store? Or the guy who does the night shift, at the Quickie Crap Express Mart? What do you think they're like? You have a better deal. You'll retire earlier with more money. You get more vacation. You get better healthcare. You get better benefits. In what sense compared to your neighbours? Your neighbours. We're just talking about the people who live in the same suburban cul-de-sac as you. You're the same town as you. In what sense are you struggling compared to them? This lady, Marie Corfield, the art teacher from Flemington, New Jersey, people I don't even know are calling me horrible names. Well, now you know what it's like to be an insurance executive or a bank vice president or all the other people that Barney Frank demonized beginning in the fall of 2008. All the guys that the Democrats told, hey, we're the only people standing between you and the pitchforks. Well, maybe the guys with the pitchforks are figuring it out, that the real threat here is not some, bank vice president at some stupid bank that's sitting on a $1 trillion worth of toxic subprime mortgages, but the real threat here is public sector unions with pensions and benefit packages that are in fact beyond accountable political control. You can't. They're effectively chiseled into granite. You can't even pass a law repealing them because they're there. They're done. They're a done deal. They're a deal for all time. You can't get a court to overturn them. You can't elect a legislature to overturn them. All you can do is appeal to the public spirit of so-called public sector unions to recognize that they're dragging the rest of the country down into the pit. The cost of we now have too small a private sector horse to pull the big government cart. It's not that difficult to figure out. These guys are simply too big, too cosseted, and too insulated from economic reality. So Marie Corfield perhaps quite genuinely thinks that teachers are struggling. Well, sorry, you signed on to deals that are unsupportable, and that in many jurisdictions, when voters figure the electoral math is against them, as they do in California, they leave. They abandon the state. Private sector, the dynamic Californians flee that state, and they leave what's left in the state to undocumented workers and public sector unions and all the rest of it. And those guys can all scratch each other's back, and in the end, they'll figure out that there's no one to pay for it all. There used to be an old saying: "He who pays the piper calls the tune." Well, the taxpayers of New Jersey pay the piper of the teachers' union, but they don't get to call the tune. They pay more and more and more, and they don't get to call the tune. And what you're doing there is setting up pre-revolutionary conditions. You look at the riots that they've had in Greece, the riots they've had in France, in Britain, in other European countries. At the moment, these riots are from people who basically are on the big government happy juice and don't want it to end. But at a certain point, that will change. And the people who are expected to pay for those guys to just sit around on the big government happy juice those guys will start rioting too, and then you'll be in civil war type scenarios. In Greece, the public sector unions, if you've got a public sector union job, you work till 2:30 in the afternoon. And you work about 5.5 months of the year. The old joke, he works 24/7. He works 24 hours a week for 7 months of the year. That doesn't even apply. You can't even do that joke about Greek public sector workers anymore, because they actually work less than that. So what we have here is an unsustainable system. And that's what people like Marie Corfield don't seem to acknowledge. Even if you think it's a good idea, that the teachers' union does such a terrific job, that it's worth paying them more than every other developed country pays its teachers, that it's worth paying, we spend more on education than any other OECD nation other than Luxembourg. I mentioned this when we had Shannon the Educator on the show. Shannon the Educator. I'm surprised, by the way, they describe, in the New York Times, they describe Marie Corfield as a teacher, because most self-respecting teachers now want to be called educators. We had Shannon the Educator on, who seemed to think that the problems in the country would be cured by actually giving the education system more money. No. We already give the education system more money per student than any other OECD nation except Luxembourg, which is a tiny little country you can fit in your rec room. A tiny, wealthy little country that will fit in your basement. We spend more than anybody else. We have nothing to show for it. And yet Marie Corfield says teachers are struggling and we need more. No, we don't. We need non-unionized teachers. We need non-credentialed teachers. We need more volunteer fire departments rather than public sector unionized fire departments, because this whole racket is unsustainable. Cannot be sustained.